Okay, greetings, brothers and sisters. The end of the 2026 Passat gathering was last night with an amazing meditation. I, I always think that these gatherings are better than the last one, which is a good sign. I don't know if they are. I think I'm always a little bit surprised that they're working still, given all the debacle that's going on with heartfulness. But wonderful sitting last night. I mean, really just an uplifting sitting, the last one. I had some issues with the videos, as you probably noticed. I, whenever I start a new month, I have to make the icons bigger in the folder called February, which we're now in February. And I got to make sure that the videos are come in terms of being the newest one on top, which I didn't do. And so I thought I had uploaded 2 of the day ones because of that, because I was my videos weren't in the right position that they should be for uploading. So I deleted the day 1, not realizing I just hadn't uploaded day 2 or day 3 for some reason. So I uploaded those things all in one day, which was, not that big a deal, but just not desirable. And then here, there was a day 4, and this is the afterthoughts after the last sitting. And maybe there'll be some more stuff if I think about it, because, these gatherings, they linger. There's ultimately ideally they should go on forever. Like, they just should have an effect, changing one's spiritual trajectory. I always sound drunk when I say that word. Forever. Like, there should be some, uplift and momentum, upliftment and momentum. Which there is, but people get used to it, and then real life starts taking over, material life and real problems. I had noticed that heartfulness, that's what reminded me Basan was coming up, was celebrated Basan on January 20th, which I guess maybe that's the day for Basan. And I don't understand that, and I think they did that a couple times near the end of Chargie's life. And I don't know if that was to make it easier for people because it was a holiday. But Lalaji was born on February 2nd, which happened to be Basant that year. I don't know if Basant must change every year. I don't understand it completely. Because usually the first day of spring would be, the calendar and the weather is different there. They really have like 3 seasons: monsoon season, not as hot season, and really hot season, right? And depending on where you are in the north of India, it's quite different, where they have a winter, where there's more like 4 seasons. But anyways, the Dodgy Truther sent me a video this morning, and it was a couple videos of people banging drums and dancing around, and he said that it was called something called the Adi Kala Ustav. Ustav is a celebration. And I'm not sure exactly the translation, but it's in the celebratory words. And he said to me, let me find what his message was. The Kana Adikala Ustav on Lalaji's birthday with a question mark and some sort of emoji. The Sahaj Marg system is about internalizing your existence, even, these gatherings particularly. They have concerts, and there were some things that Chargie did. People would sing, there'd be a talent show, and there might be, speakers and, people explain the system, but it's really about going deep inside and changing oneself. I'm going to talk about this in another audio this morning for my my next video on my regular Pockets of the Future channel, and I'll include that audio here. And it'll also be in the Journey series, there'll be some overlap. But I'm going to talk about change inside and, all these things, which will be, as inspired by this gathering. But in the Sahaj Marg system, it's supposed to be internalized, and vibration is key. And there was a couple of ashrams, one's in the Himalayas. There used to be one in Texas that they sold that were retreat centers where people would go and basically take a vow of silence and just go there. And, people would come in, make sandwiches and leave them in the fridge. Shit like that. I had a few people that went there, and I knew a few people that went there. And they would meditate, and the place was supposed to be free from conversation, free from anything but spirituality. Like, people minimum talking, and not like gossip, or not like, politics, or not like anything like that. And, you would just meditate and go inside and, be free from the outside world, no devices, no anything, and stay there for 3 days. And these gatherings were supposed to be like that, on a bigger scale, where there's people interacting, but not bringing in fucking entertainment. People, you could hear these big drums and people dancing around. This is the videos he sent me where people were dancing around in big drums. And they were doing it on Lalaji's birthday, and it had nothing to do with Lalaji. And, they've degraded the system. And I didn't look at what they did over Assad, and I probably won't. There's no reason for me to do that. Just, it'll just bum me out, because it's always a failure over there. They've wrecked it. But, the energy's still flowing, which is what I'm trying to get at here in terms of what we're doing at Gratefulness Meditation. And I'm always a little bit surprised by that, but it means that there's still hope, because the transmission, the cleaning are still working, and it doesn't really need a name or an organization. It just needs people to apply themselves and absorb it, and change, and want to, aspire to be on some sort of spiritual journey and move forward. My wife and I went to the doctor yesterday, and that was just kind of not a real doctor, like not a allopathic doctor, or someone who's more of a healer, and there's a whole, but everything with that's tough as you get older, and I'm going to talk about that in the other voiceover, so I'm not going to talk about it here. And the guy's coming to fix the well today, hopefully. I think around 9. It's 8 o'clock now. But anyways, there's hope. Like, that's, I'm going to cover this, like I said, a bunch of these things in my other videos, so I don't want to repeat them here. Things can be repeated, but I don't feel like doing it today. Just save my energy. But suffices to say, in terms of the stuff to do with the gathering, and just in general, it's having the effect, that the desired effect. And really, I think better in some ways if there was, a real gathering with people, in terms of a material gathering of people. I won't call it a real gathering, because this one is a real gathering. It's just, people aren't coming together, and there's no organization to do that, which I've talked about before. But the most important thing is that the method and the system are still working, and they seem to be working better each time, which is a good sign. And it doesn't have to be like the Gratefullness thing or the Sahaj Marg thing. It just has to be that these tools and system are available, and they're being overseen by the powers that be, and that people can access them without, knowing the history, and knowing the stuff to do with Sahaj Marg. All those things should be known, and the literature and all those things are important, and should be preserved. But people can get it through the source, connect directly to the source, and be informed, and they can communicate and develop and evolve and change, and these things, which is what the system's all about. So my wife and I started watching more of the Lalaji movie, and there's a scene where his friends try to hold him down, and it's just a very sort of gay scene where he doesn't fight back. There's another story that they don't tell in the movie where Lalaji went into, this is when he's older in his life, and he went somewhere with an older person or respected person, and somebody was treating them badly, and especially the older person. And Lalaji, did something spiritually to make the guy who was being a punk, his stomach to hurt, like unbearably so. And the guy begged for forgiveness because he knew it was happening. But so there's that, but they don't show that. But he's being roughed up by his friends trying to force alcohol down his throat. Some of these scenes are just contrived, and whatever it is, they show him getting a job, which sort of changed everything for him. They were living in poverty for a while, then he gets a job. It was like 10 rupees a month, which, right now I think the exchange rate is 60 rupees to $1. So he was making 10 cents a month. But, in the 1800s in India, that was, I guess, a more substantial amount of money. And so things started to change for him. But there's these scenes where he's writing, or you can hear his thoughts, and he's, some of his spiritual teachings, and he's having these, spiritual revelations that are not really, things that we would understand so much. They're, they're versed in yogic knowledge. I understand them a little bit better, certainly better than I used to. Better than the normal person, because I've had some of the understanding of this stuff. I've studied it to whatever degree. But they're just very contemplative teachings. And, they're truthful, and if you think about them, they're interesting. These revelations he's having. But I'm thinking how the normal person will not be able to understand or think about these. This is also reading his book, Truth Eternal, where I think all these things came from. He wrote a series of essays. But I'm like, with idiocracy setting in, and I was thinking about all the degraded and stupid stuff I see all the time, and how the people that, gravitate to that level of consciousness would take these teachings, there's just no thought of these things, right? And so, it's kind of interesting. These people are now dancing around at these gatherings, and they're cultivating the lower stuff, right? The stuff people can't meditate, so they dance and they pound drums and they celebrate their culture heritage. It's a tribal thing. That's this ustav that they were doing at the ashram on Lalaji's birthday, and they're getting so far away from the refinement of the Sahaj Marg system, which is an internalized one. And, it's just people are degraded. And there's potential, there's always potential. And that potential is, unrealized, which I'm going to segue into. This is, I'm going to start doing my voiceover for my other video today, and I'll segue into that now. But as far as this, another successful gathering, and I'm very pleased with it every time. And I just feel, I'm kind of just blissed out, like I'm just feeling it, like a lot of positive energy. And so I'm very happy with it. Anyways, let's move on to the other thing that I was going to talk about here. Greetings, brothers and sisters. Today is Wednesday, February 4th, the gathering, the spiritual gathering that we have at Gratefullness Meditation celebrating the first Master Lalaji's birthday has ended. And I had a wonderful meditation last night, and I woke up, and my meditation this morning had some thoughts about everything. I was going to begin this video with Linda Gates, Bill Gates' wife, ex-wife, talking about these Epstein revelations. And that's coming. I've already started the clips yesterday. Stuff about Trump suing people. But the first thing I want to say, and I talk about this, at the end of the video I say, only spirituality will save this world, which is a line from the second Master Babaji's, one of his books, and it's repeated in the Whispers of the Brighter World. And it's something that I 100%, like if I'm sure about something, it's that. Like in all this big mess, that only spirituality will save this world. And I talk about, there's a great audio that, passed through me, where, I'm being a conduit for these, this information. And it was something about, and I think the video's called, There Is No Political Solution. And I don't know where that is. It's from some months ago. But, I've talked about this all the time in different ways, but that one was more, crystal clear, more, dedicated just to that one idea. But there is no political solution, and you can see politics gets worse and the politicians get worse. And, politics itself is deeply flawed. But the real problem with politics, it's us against them. It's, it's a divisive, my party versus your party, that there's somehow these two opposing forces. And in our political system, it's the liberals who want to change things, want to progress, progressives. And they want to change things. They want to get rid of the old guard, the old rituals, the old, they want to bring in the religion of science and get rid of the religion, the current religion. And the people who want to make America great again, the people who don't want change, and they want to go back to the way it was when they were, younger. They want to recreate their, what they consider a dream time, time before all this liberal changes. And change and tradition are both important. There are things that are good in tradition, and there's things that are good in change. And also that with the liberal being, full out, being just going full out, and conservative being conserve your energy, and, liberal being risk takers, and conservatives being conservative. Let's be careful. Let's be prudent. Let's think about what we're doing. And, those things really don't exist in our current day politics. But you have these opposing forces. The youth that wants to change things, the youth that's inspirational, the youth that's, idealistic, and wants to get rid of all the stuff. They start realizing how corrupt everything is, how wrong everything is, and how can we behave like that? And they think humans are better than they are. Like these kids getting upset about what's going on in Gaza or what went on in Gaza, and kids start finding out, college kids, younger people, that how bad adults are acting, and they say, how can you guys be like this? And you start seeing that your parents is pieces of shit who have compromised themselves and sold out, and you think you can do so much better. And then you get beat down by the system and tells you, yeah, this is whatever it is, right? And people who go into politics with idealistic, ideas of whatever it might be, and then they just get corrupted by the system. And so, our system particularly is degraded now, but you can have these oppositional forces that balance each other out and come to the right conclusion. That's something you could have. That's whatever, politically, whatever it is. But, I was thinking about this angry bitch, Megyn Kelly, and Candace Owens going after Erica Kirk and TPUSK. And these things are entertaining, but, there's nothing there at the end of it, right? It's not making the world a better place. Like most of this stuff with the truth community, looking at the elites, or what I call the controllers, and blaming them for everything, and, now blaming the left more because there's more right-wing good truthers. And, these two things, and people always thinking that if they could fix these shitty people that are the real problem, and, we're the heroes and they're the villains, that's a part of the good guy, bad guy mentality we have in our movies. And, there's a hero and there's a villain in these things, and, God's battling it out with Satan, and, in truth, God with a mere thought, not even a thought, and higher developed beings that work for God with mere thoughts because they can think. God can't think, can eradicate all the evil in the world, all the misguided things, but, that would defeat the whole purpose of a system where individual entities can work their way back to the source and make the right choices, that we're given the option of wrong choices. That's what human beings have, and, any creature has to some extent. We have the ability to choose the wrong thing. We have freedom of choice, and I think everybody gets a sense of that, where that's where the problems come, because people choose to do the wrong thing. And there's a couple of problems here that I want to address, which I see, human problems, which I fully understand because I struggle with them myself. That people know that they're higher developed souls. They know that they're saints. The Christian religion has fucked Christians over, just like every religion fucks people over, by pretending those people are different than you. That somehow Jesus is different than you, and that Jesus was just born to it. He just was God's only son. And which is, again, we're all children of God, so that's just stupid right off the bat. But somehow he's just there. I think the hawk is, I gotta go outside, I think the hawk is here. Okay, so I saw something fly by, but it probably wasn't the hawk. But I went out there, and, there's been a Cooper's hawk that's been, I'm pretty sure it's young because it hasn't killed any of the chickens yet. Or might have killed one of the chickens a couple months ago. I saw it kill a starling, but I went outside. It was eerily quiet, and there wasn't a lot of, my wife feeds these birds out there with chicken feed, which they want anyway. They go in the chicken coop, but she throws stuff out, not for the starlings, but for the dark-eyed juncos and the native, birds that are here, the cardinals and anyways. So I went out there, and the guineas were sounding the alarm, the guinea fowl that we have. And I went in the chicken coop, and they weren't, the hawk wasn't there, but they were all sitting in the chicken coop. Something like about half the chickens. And then I went in the section of the old barn where the chickens usually hang out. And we recently, put up this plexiglass window, and there was a hawk in there, and it flew towards the window, and then it flew through the barn and out through there's a garage door there. Kind of interesting. I like seeing the hawk, but, don't want them to eat the chickens, but it's whatever. Sometimes it disappears for a few days, but then, comes back. But anyways, so that's what happened with that. But getting back to what I was saying here, which I have to figure out what that was. So I was talking about how, there are saints, there are higher developed souls, and people can at least aspire to be saints, if not Jesus, right? But ultimately, the difference between the Sahaj Marg system, the masters of the system, who are farther along on their spiritual journey than other previous, religious figures, you're not worshiping them. You're working to reach the goal that they've achieved. That it's something that all of us have in us. We have that potential. And, it's the ultimate of the ultimate. Like, you can be the best pianist, you can be the best basketball player, you can be the best writer, you could be the best comedian, whatever it is. You could be the top of your profession, which is, excellent. You're one out of every. You're the best person. Like, you can be, the most beautiful, the smartest, whatever, the fastest. These things could be achieved, and they're great achievements, but none of them compare to a spiritual evolution, and elevation, right? Becoming the best version of yourself, a realized soul. And these shitty religions don't want you to know that. They don't want you to know that there's some spiritual goal, and most people don't want to know it themselves. It's not like religions have to work real hard to, convince you that you can't be anything spiritually, because people are like, oh, good, I don't have to work on that, right? Because it's the hardest thing to do, because it involves service and sacrifice and doing for others, and, all of those things. But it's there, right? Spirituality and your potential, your spiritual potential, and just working on it. I resolved for my own, when I realized, what it took to be the master of the Sahaj Marg system, or on that level, not necessarily in that position, but, to reach your full potential spiritually. I was like, oh, there's just no way. Like, I understood what I would have to do. And it isn't like it's hard, like climbing a mountain hard. It's hard, like negating your negative tendencies, your selfish tendencies, your individual tendencies, and committing just to serve and sacrifice. And that's, people don't want to do that, right? People are selfish now. We all are. And so we struggle with it. And I understand, because I struggle with myself. But, at least work on it somewhat. At least, understand that there's something there, and you work on it a little bit. You don't have to, give everything up and, give up your freedom to choose to do the wrong thing, because that's what it takes. We have the freedom to choose to do the wrong thing, and only one right choice in every situation, which is, the choice of the divine essence inside of us would make. But start cultivating that relationship, and then, at least dabble in it, right? And people don't even want to fucking do that. They just want to sit there and look at other people and blame them and blame the left and blame the right. Everybody knows this, right? Everybody fucking knows this. And it's a simple fact. In your family, in your relationship with your wife and or husband, in your work life, as a society, as a country, as a team, any organization where there's a group of people who are working to achieve a goal. You're working to make something or create something, run a business, win a championship, whatever it might be, right? Wherever you're on a team and you have a goal. When you start infighting, when you start to put your energy into fighting with your teammates, with your family members, with your spouse, everything stops. Any kind of progress, everything gets reverted, and you start to implode, right? Your goals disappear from view. If you don't reverse that situation, you're fucked. Like, I talked about how I worked for, I was a waiter for a number of years. And one of my managers said, you just need one negative person, and then you have to fire the whole staff, right? When one person starts talking shit about the restaurant, complaining, and just everyone's will gets, everyone starts to get negative towards the place and loses their, this is why I always say, and be grateful, right? The things that I say at the end of the video, only spirituality will save this world, and be grateful are the two keys to all this. Being grateful for whatever God gives you, and also focus on your spiritual evolution, that there's a spiritual goal, and these miseries and difficulties you go through are there to hone you and make you better, and they're there as blessings and not curses. They're not there to thwart your progress. They're obstacles that help you evolve into what you need. They shape you, and you're like being in a forge, being beaten by a hammer and being made into something by divinity. And so these are the things that we need to focus on, right? This idea that these things are good for us, and we need to be grateful for them as we move forward, because we're becoming something. But people don't want to change themselves, right? So that's the issue here. Like, people don't want to change. They want to see themselves as perfect, like I'm a complete, whatever. Or at least I'm part of the good guys in the good team. It's just these other guys over here. And that always kills you, kills a society, kills a country, kills a family, when people start looking at everyone else as being the people that have to change, or the other group is the people that have to be changed, or everyone else but you that has to change. And that's what everybody's doing. It's fucking weak, it's cowardly, it's fundamentally dishonest, and that's all the truth community has become. Look at these sheeple over here, look at these politicians, look at these pieces of shit over here, and I'm great, and the people with me are great. It's and it's them that has to change, and we're fucked if they don't change. But we'll just keep on belittling them and mocking them and telling them what the piece of shits they are, and that's always effective. And so, like, that just doesn't work, right? And so I cover it here, and I mock people and I talk about how bad they suck, but I'm not counting on them for anything, like the people who are in the so-called show, because they're lower developed people who are, they have to learn their lesson here, and then eventually come about that there's a spiritual life, that there has to be something they have to do, that they have to change. But it's almost everybody, like almost nobody even is just taken, is dabbling in spirituality, dabbling in self-improvement, working to be a better person. I mean, even people who are good people, they don't really, they're not pushing to. I mean, we'd had whole cultures where people were pretty cool, Aboriginal cultures, native cultures, but people weren't reaching up to the next level. That's one of the reasons those cultures were absorbed. They were pretty cool, and they were good with nature, and they had pretty, interesting skill sets, and whatever they had in lives in terms of their, these things, but very primitive. They're primitive, and they weren't reaching up to higher levels of consciousness that all of us possess. And so, that's where we are as a species, and people just don't want it. And so there's no reason to whine about anything, because that's, if there's a punishment, it's coming from the inability to do what you're supposed to do, and to, I mean, everybody's supposed to be going forward and evolving and changing and adapting. And, adapting's maybe not the correct word, because that's more of a material thing. But adaptation is, part of, like, the need of the day, right? Like right now, we have a spiritual solution. We have to change as a species, or we're fucked. Like, that's the problem that we have. And it's not about fucking changing other people. Like I said, the people at the top of the system are lower than you. They're lower than most of the people that understand what I'm talking about in these videos, right? Because they're just, they're still struggling with power, and the money and power and things. And many of us have had past lives where we did that and realized that wasn't the goal. So we've had that in our past. And so it's not, it's not being famous. It's not being, a king. It's not being, these things. It's something very primitive, first life people, when a soul incarnates for the first time, looks up at these, kings and these people and go, if I was just one of them, and so they aspire for that and eventually achieve it. Have 2 or 3 lives in, 3, 4 lives, 5, whatever. And they realize, hey, this isn't it. And some people get stuck with it. They don't care. They don't want to give it up once they had it. And they just keep on reincarnating as powerful people. Like these people run the controllers, these people, but they're, people, souls, maybe lost souls that were here to do God's work, and they got compromised, and then they get caught in this trap. But, those people you could expect nothing from, even the ones that were, once higher developed beings that have fallen. Those people are worthless, because they're not, they're not engaged in the divine reason that they're here, that their soul incarnated in the first place. And so, I got some bullshit to show you with Trump suing people and fucking Melinda Gates and some other thing, I can't remember what that is, that I shot yesterday. And I know there's some new Candace Owens thing about some timeline bullshit. I don't know if I'm covering that for Erica Kirk and TPUSK, but just keep in mind whenever I do anything or cover it, it means nothing. It's worthless. There might be some entertainment value. There might be some funny jokes. There's those things, but the key message here that has to be understood, the thing that I believe and the purpose of this channel, is to help remind people that you have a spiritual path and a spiritual goal to get to, and none of this stuff means anything. Yeah, maybe you have to watch it just to understand what you need to do moving forward. But none of these people are going to change a demonic system that is, that'll collapse under its own depravity, which is, inevitable, which I talk about all the time. But you have a path, right? You have a spiritual path. And each person needs to find that, or, individually at least, but collectively. And without that, there's nothing, right? Without some divine purpose, it's just everyone's spinning their wheels in a shitty material simulation. Our true soul, our true self is spiritual, an essence, and this simulation then no longer has any positive effect. It just pulls souls in the wrong direction, right? Like if your soul incarnates and then you add a bunch of baggage that you have to work off in your next life before you can even start evolving, and you just keep on reincarnating and creating these impressions, these samskaras, and becoming farther and farther, grosser and grosser, and the veil of your ability to see the divinity within you and God, be able to connect with God because you have all this grossness, and you become more and more lost with each succeeding life. Well, that's problematic. Then their system, the simulation, is broken. It's a video game that now distracts everybody from finding, their true path. I'm 62 years old. I've come from good genetics, but my wife and I went to a holistic healer we went to after we got COVID, when COVID dissipated my physical body. And, my wife and I are in good physical shape. I'm 60. My wife is a few years younger than me. I'm 61. And, we're in the stage of our life where our genetic flaws, weaknesses in our genetic system, things that are going to start breaking down in our bodies are starting to break down. The spike protein hasn't helped, and we have some issues because of that. But even if there wasn't that, you get to as you get older, gravity and toxins and environmental issues, and you have a lifespan. Your death is already kind of written. And then there's some early exits that people have. There's exit points. I fell off a zip line when I was a kid, and 14, and I could have died. And there's choice points. Your soul might say, all right, let's take an early exit here, right? But thankfully, or I don't know, maybe good or bad, I chose not to do that at 14. But we have this time limit, and going into it really becomes about what state you are in when you die. Like now with people's choices and all the environmental toxins and the foods and the bad choices, and that weaken your system, and but it becomes about just preserving what you have. And my wife and I were talking about, we need to start doing yoga and stretching. She went to this acupuncturist. It was a whole thing, because like they were just taking my blood, and I've had this before where, my heart was, I've been having irregular heartbeats, and they've been getting worse since I've been going to this is the second visit I've gone to this place, right? But I'm talking about this in terms of, like, as you get older, you realize that death is there waiting for you. Your body is now no longer, you have these things that happen, and then you just don't recover. Like, you start losing the ability to do things, your physical body, and then there's just, it's just a reminder that it's ending, right? It's coming to an end. And, when you're younger, at some point you physically stop growing, but you're developing as a person. You become a parent, you get married, you have a career, you have these things, and you're on your upward swing. And then, it's about retiring, and your kids are, grown, and then all these things start happening, and you're like, well, what's happening to me? Like, now I'm going the wrong direction. And then as you realize that, and then there's just these, the trip to the doctor or whatever, medical path you choose is usually some bad news. Oh, you're losing this and that. It's just, this is setting in. There's things are happening. And these things that you're trying to fight off some of the effects of aging, right? But you realize that this is, it's ending, and so what's important to you? Like, what are you going to do? Like, how you're going to go out? What's important? What's the purpose of your life now, right? Like, you had these things that you were supposed to achieve, and you either did or you didn't. Your life is a success or a failure in various areas. Not all things are successes. Great career but shitty family. Good family but poverty. Just underachievement, whatever it might be, right? But then it becomes about, well, where am I going now? Is this it? Is this like, is there an afterlife? These types of things, people start, wondering about that kind of stuff. And, it sneaks up on you, and it happens, relatively quickly. And then once it happens, the degradation can be very fast, right? And you see some people age really quickly, and, some people, it's a slower process, but make no mistake about it, it's there for everyone. All the people who are older know what I'm talking about. You cross 45, 50, and it's just, it's just a, kind of a gaining awareness, like, about like the reality of your situation, that, you're not inevitable. There's a time limit, right? There's an expiration date, and you're approaching it quicker and quicker. Some people leave early, die some tragic death. And now, of course, I just did a Hollywood celebrities dropping like flies on my Apocalaughs Now channel. Of course, now with the spike protein and the vax and things, there is that element now. People's getting turbo cancer, heart issues, but there's always been accidents and tragedies, and people dying too young and these things. But if you think about your legacy, what you're leaving behind, and there's all the things you enjoyed, and things that the issues you had, and some of these things have been barriers to your spiritual evolution. Some of your proclivities, some of your, whatever they might be, addictions or things like addictions, whatever, that are preventing you from becoming what you could have become in this life. Because, like, people build statues, and, you name a building after yourself, and who gives a fuck, right? Like, if you're really realistic about it, who cares? That your face is on a dollar bill or some bullshit like that, right? George Washington, the historical figures. In 1,000 years, no one will know who Abraham Lincoln is and George Washington. These, the ancient statues, and this culture. There might, English will disappear as a language. There'll be no thing called America. 2,000 years, 5,000 years, 10,000 years, 100,000 years. There's nothing that leaving your so-called legacy behind. So your legacy has to be a spiritual one. Like, what did you do to move your soul forward? Did you burden your soul with, bad decisions that you have to pay for in a future life? And that's the majority of people. And if we keep on going in the wrong direction through this process, and people refuse to get it and refuse to rise up to a higher level, this species becomes a failed experiment, right? And it disappears from the simulation. So that's where we are as a people. And so, the choice is there for people to see or not. The information is available. And like I said, there has been saints in the past, saints that we know about, spiritual people that are there who are actively working to form a connection with the divinity within them. People that you might even know, grandparents, people who are inspirational, that seem just to be a cut above. And everybody can choose that. And, I hope that everybody will. And right now it doesn't look like that's going to happen, but, things will hopefully change for the better. But with that in mind, let's get to the other stuff here. Okay, so with that brings to close the 2026 Lalaji spiritual gathering and Sahaj Marg spiritual gathering here. Somehow this thing got scheduled here for 10:30, day 4. So I'm looking at the videos here that are coming up. That I have day 4 that hasn't been published yet, so that's coming up at 10:30. So I'll put this one up a little bit later. But I might have some thoughts about this, which I may or may not include in a video here. Sort of like epilogue stuff, and there's always additional information flow at these gatherings. But for now, this is the end of the the coverage of the gathering, and I'm very happy about it in terms of, happy is not the right word. I feel a sense of well-being about the whole thing. Confirmation of that the opportunity still exists. Only spirituality will save this world. It's Paramount definitely pointing for the Apocalaughs and the Ascension. I would have a blessed day and be grateful.